Our consumer-directed care journey started about 2 or 3 years ago when we won our first significant round of consumer-directed care funding out of the aged care approvals round. We've worked very hard over that period of time to really understand the purpose of that and to work very closely with our customers in providing the type of experience that they're wanting and that fits within the government policy objectives. The business model has changed over that period in some subtle ways. As an organisation, we had already been providing a relatively consumer-directed environment for our customers, and we had been working with them in order to define and meet their objectives. So for our organisation, it wasn't a dramatic change. The bigger changes for us were the behind-the-scenes accounting changes, the back-office changes that required us to look very closely at the way that we accounted for money and how we reported that to our clients to give them more insight into how their packages were being spent. The consumer choice environment has been quite an interesting journey, I think, for most organisations and certainly for ourselves. There seems to have been a lot of debate across the industry as to what choice should actually be. Our view is that the choice that was offered through the consumer-directed care packages was not the choice that consumers actually wanted. The choices they were being given was how the inputs to their service should be managed, whereas in reality the choice most consumers really want to make is whether they want to come to us or whether they want to go to one of our competitors. If you think about it in an environment where you're purchasing services yourself, you're normally purchasing on the basis that you've got an objective or a goal that you want to achieve with that, and you really want to leave it to the organisation to determine how you achieve that goal. So long as you achieve the goal and you receive an invoice that matches what you're expecting, then you're generally fairly happy with that service. What we've been asking consumers to do across Australia with the consumer-directed care package is to manage all of those inputs, and that's not really what most of our consumers are telling us they're wanting to do. They're not wanting to tell us who should be delivering this element of the service or who should be doing this assessment or where we should be purchasing this particular piece of equipment from. What they're wanting to know is that we're able to assist them to meet their goals. Consumer-driven care is a completely different environment to what we've been operating in. The industry has largely been focused on the back office changes which are needed in order to manage the CDC or the consumer-directed care environment. In reality, that's a minor change in comparison to what's going to happen in February 2017. February 2017 could be characterised as the mother of all disruptions to any industry. I have not found a parallel in any other industry where a single customer who's been doing 100% of the purchasing vacates the market and then a whole range, hundreds of thousands of new consumers enter that marketplace and start making purchasing decisions. This is Uber or Airbnb on steroids. It's a massive change, and any organisation that doesn't think that requires a complete refresh of their organisation from top to bottom is probably kidding themselves. Boards across this industry should be thinking in terms of both the risk and the opportunities. There's obviously enormous risk for organisations as we enter this environment. The contracts which have been in place previously are suddenly meaningless. All of the security that we've had when we've raised funds from banks or when we've made finance decisions or sustainability decisions for our organisations is just suddenly disappearing. So we're now in an environment which is much more like a market-driven retail environment, and there are plenty of parallels for that across the Western economies of the world. It's not too difficult to find skill sets that are used to managing those sorts of risks. The exciting thing about these changes is that it will ultimately be the customer that determines which organisation is successful on the basis of how well each organisation meets their expectations and their needs. Well, at the moment, it's very difficult to work out whether we meet our customers' needs. Certainly we do surveys. We collect information such as Net Promoter Scores and a range of other satisfaction surveys. We monitor the feedback and so on that we're getting. But there's a gulf between thinking that your customers love you and knowing that your customers love you. And what we're all going to find out in February 2017 is whether our customers really love us or whether we just think they love us. Because once they've got a choice, the experience in other industries industries where people have gone from a position of not having choice to having choice has been that a lot of organisations find out that once a customer has a choice, perhaps they don't love them so much. Well, as a CEO, what keeps me up at night as we approach February 2017 is the question of whether our organisation is really ready for those changes, whether we can position ourselves to be successful in that new environment, not just whether we can defend what we've got, but whether we can then continue the type of success that we've had in the past into the future. So there's an enormous amount of work that goes across this organisation, and I think the responsibility of the CEO is to ensure that everybody's feeling somewhat unsettled about the risk that they're facing in February 2017. From our perspective, what's made us successful in the past is not what's going to make us successful in the future, and we need to be really mindful of all of the things that need to change across the organisation, and that means every staff member needs to approach their job quite differently. We're not selling to the government anymore. We can't take for granted that our customers are going to come to us. Every one of us needs to question whether we've got the right skill sets, whether there's gaps that we need to close, whether we've got the right culture in the organisation, the right processes, the right structure, whether we've even got the right skills on our board in order to be able to manage that new environment. So it's both a very exciting but also a very risky period for an organisation to go through. I think we're going to find in 5 years or so from now, when the dust settles around these changes, where each organisation actually sits. We'll have a much better idea at that point in time who our competitors are really going to be in the longer term. Any sort of mixed portfolio, they need to really look closely at the home care portfolio at this point in time and decide whether they've really got the determination to be successful in this particular sector. Because it's not just going to happen by chance. As we move around the industry, we're seeing a lot of organisations that are massively underprepared. They haven't got the skill sets in place. They're at that first stage of learning where they don't know what they don't know about what that new environment is going to look like. But we've also seen some incredibly sophisticated organisations in terms of the way that they are going to approach the market, their capability of communicating with their customers, how well across this CDC model they actually are, the amount of feedback and the metrics that they're getting in from their customers. They really know what they're doing in this space. If you haven't got a really great plan in place at this point in time, you're probably really going to struggle after February 2017. I think what we're dealing with as we go into this new environment is a different way of approaching the market. We're still doing the same services for the same people for the same reasons, but the difference is that rather than us doing it on behalf of the government, we're doing it directly for consumers who are able to make their own decisions about how well we're doing in meeting their objectives. And for the most part, our consumer base, our customers, are a very intelligent group of people who are well used to making important decisions in their lives about what's going to affect them in terms of their health, their well-being, their economic prosperity and so on. So we have an enormous amount of faith in our customer base to be making the right decisions. It's going to be very difficult for the government to continue their very generous arrangements around our working capital in terms of paying in advance. February 2017, I think there's going to be some pain across the industry as we move from what I would expect would be a payment in advance model to a payment in arrears model. But we're talking about a few weeks of working capital. It shouldn't be too great at that particular point in time. There's some interesting feedback though from the government in relation to their latest consultation papers though that may also have an effect, and that is that they are proposing that client surpluses will follow the client from organisation to organisation. And I think that's a really positive thing because it lowers the switching costs for consumers. They don't have to leave previously earned balances behind. It does open up a range of administrative challenges, and it also creates a great deal of pain for organisations that are going backwards in terms of their customers, because not only are they going to lose revenue, but they're also going to be paying out their working capital in order to each time a particular customer leaves them. We haven't yet seen the technology players enter our industry in a really big way in the way that we have in, say, the taxi industry or the accommodation industry. But there's every reason why that could take place. I think each organisation needs to prepare themselves for that. I think disruption is just a natural process. I think that it's the responsibility of great leadership teams to be looking out, to understand what those risks are, and to be building the models within their own organisations in order to be able to respond and to refresh their own business models before somebody else does it for them. For anybody that's in a leadership position in this industry, you need to really be thinking about whether you've got what it takes in order to succeed in this new environment. You cannot take for granted that what made you successful in the past will continue to work into the future. It's just not going to work that way. Our new customers are going to be making decisions for a completely different set of reasons to what our customer did in the past, and we are going to live or die by how well we manage to address those concerns and expectations, and how well we manage to delight our customers into the future. I think that's a really positive thing for the sustainability of this industry. I think it's a really great thing for organisations that really managed to change their business model in order to address those customer concerns, and I think that it's a great thing for customers and our community generally.